Hi, everyone. Welcome to Humane Voices, the official podcast of the Humane Society of the United States. Carrie and Austin here talking about helping animals in crisis. Carrie, how are you doing? I see there's a little bit of a change in the background. Is that virtual?
I'm doing okay. I actually came into our physical office for the first time since March, and man, it is very strange being here. It's like entering a time capsule. Every now and then I'll see one of our colleagues down the hall, at least, I think it's one of our colleagues because they're wearing a mask, and I hope it's one of our colleagues, and they probably hope it's me. But so, it seems okay here, but it's very, very strange. It is nice seeing our wall art. I'm going to tip up very briefly to see there's a chameleon in there somewhere, I think. So anyway, how are you holding up, Austin?
Yeah, I'm good. I've hung up some wall art myself. That's probably the extent of the activities that I've done here.
But and you're not going to show it to us? Is it
no,
not fit for podcasting?
It's not a lot. It is. Here. I don't know if you could see it all the way at the end. There. Oh, it's through the lights.
Yes, I see a blinding light that I'm not going to go into.
So you see the Klimt, and it's like some asymmetrical. I've been like trying to be really fancy, and all these people are like, yeah, that's crooked and that's wrong. So I don't know if I did it right or not. But anyway, so yeah, that's same old. But way more exciting than my wall art is our special guest for today's show. Jessica Johnson, Senior Director of the Animal Rescue Team at the Humane Society of the United States.
Yay!
Woo! Jess, thank you so much for chatting with us, for sitting down with us today to talk for a little bit.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we said a little bit earlier, we're talking about, animals in crisis. You are, obviously your team's name sums it up fairly well, Animal Rescue Team, but could you expand a little bit on the work that you do, kind of, if it's not the day-to-day, maybe the larger projects that you're working on and maybe what's coming up?
Sure. So some of the stuff our team does, of course, there's the day-to-day operations, but in the middle of the day-to-day operations, we're always preparing for larger operations. So we come in when the resources outstrip the local community. So if city or county or a state even has a large-scale cruelty case or a disaster response, and they don't have the equipment, the personnel, the finances, any of these resources in order to appropriately handle their response, that's when our team comes in. And we have a number of staff that have a wide array of different skills in animal crimes, evidence documentation, swiftwater, slackwater certification for search and rescue efforts. So there's a number of skills across the board that our team holds.
Jessica, just out of curiosity, have you seen an evolution around, when you talk about the communities that are, when resources outstrip the community's capacity, how often does that happen? And is it something that's evolved over time? Do you see more communities that are more prepared for disasters and large scale cruelties, or fewer as, budgets and such, get cut? And
Sure. So we pre-COVID, there might be a different world after COVID that we may need to understand. But pre-COVID, absolutely, the communities are learning that they need to prepare before something happens. So whether that be a natural disaster or what we would consider a man-made disaster, which would be a large-scale cruelty case, animal fighting, a large-scale breeding operation, a hoarding operation, things like that. So we do a lot of training and proactive work in the animal shelter and law enforcement community, just trying to spread the word that you need to think about how you're going to react to something before it happens, because inevitably you're gonna stumble upon something, and if there's not a plan, then it's really challenging.
Of course. So do you find that the communities that are in high, it's silly to call them high disaster zones, but there are areas of the country that are more sort of regularly impacted by things like hurricanes, by things like tornadoes? Do those communities tend to be better prepared and sort of more used to running the drill? And
absolutely, states like Florida, California, Texas, they're used to it. States like Louisiana, they're used to it, but they're they have a more difficult time, just because the flooding can be so severe. But yeah, so when we're talking about tornadoes, we're talking about our southeastern, quadrant for our Atlantic hurricanes, because there is a difference between Atlantic hurricanes and the Pacific hurricanes. So, but most of what we see is the Atlantic side. So you're talking about Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, sometimes all the way up to, Virginia, Maryland, not as often. And then, as you go west, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, those areas for hurricanes.
So how have things changed, or how has your team adapted when you go into these states that are affected by natural disasters, and some of these states are high risk for COVID? How has your team been kind of responding to something like that?
Yeah, so we haven't had a major response yet.
Okay.
I'm
Crossing fingers.
Yeah.
Because we're hoping that the hurricane season this year, the Atlantic hurricane season this year, was predicted to be bad. However, we're hoping that that's not going to happen, and that we won't have a need to respond.
It's 2020, so I think let's all do it
Yeah.
triple finger cross. Like
No
if I had
meteors.
a third arm, I would be like the third. Yeah.
Seriously.
But we've been doing a lot of preparing and talking about what that would look like. How can we keep our team safe? We certainly don't want to come into a community to help and bring something into that community either. So, we're trying to think outside the box and think, are there local resources that we can tap into, that we can provide some kind of training to, or financial resources, or equipment that can, be provided to them, and we can, help them remotely over Zoom. We're trying to think if there's ways to do that. And obviously if not, and our team does need to deploy, what does that look like? And, how can we help, and how can we be effective, but also safe?
When is hurricane season usually? I know you said Atlantic, but does it shift coastal?
Yeah, so no, so hurricane season is just hurricane season.
Okay.
And it's from June 1st to November 30th. So it's a solid half of the year.
Yeah. Okay.
We're in it. We're in it
Wow.
right now.
Jeez.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the time of year when everybody starts opening maps and the radar and being like, oh no, you stay right where you are. You stay right where you are. Yeah.
So that is, that's hurricane season. However, this year we did see 2 named storms in May. And this is the 6th year in a row that we've seen named storms prior to this official start of hurricane season.
When you're preparing for these big cases, Jess, is there a difference between how your team prepares for, hurricane season, which is somewhat predictable, I guess, and you can sort of see it happening every year and kind of what the usual procedures are, versus how you would prepare for a major cruelty case, a puppy mill case, a big seizure?
Yes, yeah, there's obviously much different responses, a number of different skills needed for a disaster response. There's a lot of, it's more search and rescue. It's more field work. You're out there, you're either in a boat, driving through neighborhoods in a boat, which is really devastating to see, or you're providing assistance in a shelter when folks are having to evacuate and they need to take their animal somewhere or something like that. So it's much different, and a number of different skills involved, and there's a lot of time to prepare. We know that hurricanes are coming. We never go in pre-storm because we don't want to add evacuees. We don't want to add potential victims. So typically we're called in later for a hurricane. So we sit back and watch. We try to reach out to groups that are shelters or law enforcement partners that are in harm's way, and just let them know, hey, we're here. Let us know if you need anything. Is there anything that we can help you with beforehand to prepare? And then afterwards is and sometimes it's weeks afterwards, because the hurricane comes through, dumps a bunch of water. And then as the water starts draining, depending on where you're at and where the rivers are and et cetera, the water starts draining north to south. So sometimes you're seeing flooding weeks later, depending on where it is. Sometimes it's 3 to 5 days later. So you really don't see the full impact until well after the hurricane has already moved its way through. And of course the government officials will go in. People come first, so they search and rescue for people. They want to make sure that it's safe for responders to come in too. So usually the requests don't start coming in until well after a hurricane has passed. A cruelty case, a major cruelty case, we're pretty much ready to go. Because that can happen at any time. There's often no warning. So we have a huge fleet, and we have a lot of equipment that's stored in Nashville. And when we're, called in and asked for assistance for a large cruelty case, we try to work the pieces together. One of the most difficult things in coordinating a cruelty case, and one of the most time-consuming pieces, is finding a place for temporary sheltering. If like I said in the beginning, we're coming in when the needs outstrip the community. So these shelters usually don't have room for 200, 300, 400, 500 animals, depending on what you're looking at. So where are they going to go? So we basically come in and we build a temporary shelter, which is, we have shelter staff that's really incredible at doing that. But one of the hardest parts, and one of the things when we talk about preparedness for cruelty cases as well, is, again, think about it before you need it. So are there buildings in the city or the county that aren't being used? Is there a fairgrounds, that isn't being used? Maybe it's off season. We've used an old prison before. So, old schools that aren't being used. So these are things that we ask, when we're training, and ask people to start thinking about, because if you don't have an idea of something to use beforehand, it can be hard to find.
Yeah. And there's a lot of adaptability, and it seems like you to the situation and to the context, both in the man-made design. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. There's the phone.
Is that a hurricane calling? Because if it is, hang it up.
Hang
it up, Austin.
That's gonna kill me. Okay, here we go. We're back. One of the biggest questions that I think I hear a lot, I mean, Carrie, I don't know if you hear it as well, but there's a lot of people that are like, wow, you guys are amazing. You're in the field and you're doing a lot of this spectacular work that is, that it's really exciting to see and to hear these success stories. And wow, you guys are, in the field, real heroes. How can I get involved? I feel like a lot of people just go like, yeah, I can do this too. And I think there's a misconception there. So
there's a skill set involved here, people.
Seriously. You don't just get up going, yep, I can do this too. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. And there's, most of the people on our team have been doing this for years. I've been doing this for over 15 years myself. So we have, there's a lot of experience that goes into this. You touched on adaptability a little while ago. So some of it's, personality wise too. You do have to be adaptable. We start at plan A and we usually end at plan double Z by the end of it. We just have to, we just have to roll with the punches. And there is a misconception because, when there's videos or pictures, a lot of it's, holding puppies or kittens or, all these happy moments. And those are wonderful moments, but they're very small snippets of what actually happens. Yeah. So there's a lot of logistics involved. So we need, people that have really great logistics brains and can figure that out. People that know how to build a shelter. We have veterinarians and vet techs that need that skill set. For search and rescue, we have folks that really need to be honed in on the safety aspect, safety officers. So we have some retired firefighters on our team that they didn't start out in the animal field, but they have a passion for animals, and they also have this really great past experience with firefighting and people safety. And we have a huge fleet, so we need people that can drive an 18-wheeler. We need people that are able to drive a big dually with a trailer on the back of it, whether it's loaded with horses or boats. So our crimes team has law enforcement experience. So they need to know how to process evidence, how to collect evidence, take photographs on a property, talk law enforcement through how to prosecute an animal crime. And often we're providing expert testimony in a criminal case. So, there's a comfort level of testifying there. So there's so many pieces that go in, that are behind the scenes, that are really boring. People don't want to see that stuff because it's boring. But there's a lot of pieces and skills that go into the final product. Yeah.
I think that's such a good point, Jess. Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that, just because, I think we do, for obvious reasons, like people love seeing the sort of sweet faces and the sort of bright eyes of the animals that you guys rescue. But there is so much that goes into that basically all those things you just described, whether it's the driving of the truck or the filing of paperwork or the collection of evidence that leads to those moments where an animal's life is saved. There's a massive amount of skills and work that goes into those tender moments that get captured on film. Or not really film anymore, I guess. It's not film anymore, Carrie.
Yeah. And those are our rewards. Those are the moments when we're, all of our hard work is paid off. All of our years of experience, knowing what we're doing, knowing it's going to be a successful rescue, whether it's a disaster or a criminal case. Those are the rewarding moments, and it's great to be able to share that. But yeah, there is a lot going on in the background.
I know you mentioned the sort of need when I really liked what you said about the, when you're doing training in communities where you have the folks think about like where could they set up a temporary shelter. I think that's one of the things that I think is really interesting right now, and maybe you could speak to a little bit, is personal preparedness. I mean, since we're in the middle of hurricane season, I think there is still, like, no matter how many times you sort of hear it, you kind of never think it's going to happen to you until it actually happens to you. And so if you could sort of advise people about like what they should be doing, whether they're in a hurricane zone or not in the hurricane zone, like what are the things that you sort of generally think just people in the general public, pet owners, should be doing to make sure that their family is prepared if something serious happens?
Absolutely. This is one of our favorite things to talk about. So we talk about preparedness on multiple levels. And when you're talking about disaster preparedness, all of us should be prepared. If you're in a hurricane disaster prone area, if you're in a wildfire prone area, of course, please be prepared. But disasters can happen at any time. Our houses can catch fire. At any moment, things can happen, or tornado could hit pretty much anywhere throughout the country. And all of a sudden you're having to evacuate and you have no home left. So we push disaster preparedness for everybody across the board. And what that means when you're talking about animals, so your dogs and cats, we recommend putting a kit together for at least 5 days, depending on how long you could potentially be away from being able to obtain supplies, but at least 5 days. Over the weekend when they were looking at the hurricane hitting Hawaii, they were recommending that people pack supplies for 14 days. Wow. So that could really depend on what type of disaster and where you're living and what type of resources that you could find, post disaster. So, but what that looks like, if you have a cat, or multiple cats, a carrier for each cat, a litter box, litter scoop, a certain amount of litter, 5 to 7 days worth of food. If they're on medication, extra medications, print out any vet records you have. Every time you take them to the vet and have an updated vaccination history, print that out. And for dogs, it's, if you have small dogs, carriers as well, leashes, collars. Always recommend having a collar on your pet at all times with a tag with your contact information. One other thing that we recommend for our household pets, or all of our pets actually, is recent pictures of you with your pet. Take a bunch of selfies once a month. Take some selfies, because if something happens and you end up getting separated from your pet and you can't find your paperwork, if you've lost your house for something or something like that, and you don't have access to your paperwork, and this is something that we saw in California a couple of years ago for the campfires, that came through really quickly. People were at work, and it came through remarkably quickly. 90% of one of the towns was completely burned. 90%. The veterinary offices, the restaurants, the doctor's offices, homes, everything was gone. So if they were lucky enough to be able to have their pet, if their pet was able to get away from it, or if they were able to come home, scoop their pet and go, they didn't have records, but their veterinary office was gone too. So they weren't able to get those records. So one thing that we always recommend is having photos of you and your pet, because if that's the only thing that you have to identify that that's your pet, that's going to be really, really helpful in a shelter environment. If something were to happen and you're trying to locate your pet and prove that it's your pet. There's a lot of pets that look similar out there. So, in order to prove it's your pet, make sure you're getting not just one side, make sure you're getting all sides. If there's, a specific mark on your pet that has a very unique shape or something like that, take pictures of that, write it down. If your pet's missing certain teeth, if there's, a different colored toenail or something like that, take pictures of that and remember that, because sometimes that's what's needed to identify your pet in a shelter.
Yeah, I've taken very close-up shots of Floof's "Mama Didn't Love Me" tattoo. I'm expecting it will be very useful if he's ever separated it from me. That's a joke, people. I did not tattoo my dog. I would never do that.
I don't know. You got to shave under the arm and see the big mom tattoo on the arm. No, so is there, gosh, it would be a nightmare if I was separated from my pet. I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
But when there's insane flooding or something like that, and for some reason you are separated for your pet for 2 or 3 days or something, and your team comes in, how do you go about, obviously you said some, photos and recognizable things to reunite the pets and the owners. How do you identify that there are pets in the household? Are there signs usually that you recommend posting? Hey, I have 2 pets in the house, or what are things that you recommend for people, just so that there's an outside group of people that are trying to look for pets too?
Absolutely. If they do have those stickers you can put on your window if there's a certain number of pets you have in your home, and it depends when we're doing search and rescue. And we also, I want to put out there that we never self-deploy. We don't have jurisdiction anywhere, and that goes for natural disasters as well as cruelty cases. So we never self-deploy. We have to be requested by the local agency, whoever has jurisdiction in that agency, in that area. We have to be requested by them to come in. So, and this goes for natural disasters too, when that happens. So sometimes it's the state, sometimes it's the county. And we come in under them. We're working under them. It's not our operation. We're there as skilled animal people to come in and help. So sometimes in those situations, it's literally a search and rescue effort. So you're going, from home to home, checking the homes. If you're able to open the door or go through a window or whatever. Sometimes it's the people call in. A lot of folks that live in hurricane prone areas, they're not used to having to be evacuated for so long. For many years pre-Katrina, hurricanes came all the time. People left their home for 2 or 3 days and they were back. Before Katrina, there wasn't really anything that hit that had people gone for, weeks, sometimes at a time. So a lot of people still have that mindset. So they fill up their bathtub with water, they throw some food down, they evacuate, they think we're coming back in 2 days, it'll be fine. And then they realize, everything's flooded. I don't have a boat to get back to my house. So they call into an emergency center or the animal shelter, whoever's running the animal side of the operation. They'll usually set up some kind of phone number, dispatch area. So some of it's people calling in and saying, oh my gosh, I had to leave my pet behind. I just try to go by my house and there's, 10 feet of water and I can't get to my house, but my pets are inside. Can you help me? Can you go get them? So sometimes it's specific calls and sometimes it's door to door.
What about larger animals? That's what I was curious about. So like horses and cows.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Excellent question. And we have disaster preparedness information on our website too. If you go on our website and if you search disaster preparedness, there's a number of pamphlets that talk about large animal and talk about what you need for a dog and cat for your kit. So that's certainly one tool. But one thing we recommend for large animals, and it sounds a little silly, but when something's coming, paint. You paint your name, whoever owns the horse, your name and your contact number, or if you can fit it, put your address on there, on the horse. We have to recommend, we have to remember if they're living in a barn or some kind of confined area, unlock it, open up the gates, unlock everything. Because if something's happening, we want those animals to be able to run away. Normally we don't want our animals to run away, right? But if something's coming and we can't get back there, we don't, animals shouldn't be drowning in barns and things like that. And people think, oh, I'm going to lock them up, they're going to be safe. And then the water rises and there's no way for them to get out. So, remember, don't lock any animals up anywhere. And for our large animal friends, they have some paint that's safe for them to put your, and it's, waterproof paint to put your name and contact information on there. Wherever that animal ends up, they should be able to contact you from there.
That's great. And
Of course,
then
if
you
you're
can
not
add a
able-
safe tattoo
Right.
Yeah. Same
as
tattoo.
opposed to a bad tattoo.
Yeah, because livestock are our equine and they're difficult to evacuate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have a whole barn full of dozens of horses, that there's not a whole lot of places they can go. So it's so they tend to go to higher ground. They just need the ability to do so.
Yeah, and that of course is just yet a whole other level of challenge when you get to factory farms and such. Yeah.
Yes, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah,
that's
I
a whole
know,
nother
exactly.
episode.
Yeah.
Carrie,
A depressing one.
Yes.
What did you want to ask, Carrie? What was your question?
The thing I was just going to say is just that, like the animal rescue team are personal heroes of mine, because one of our 2 dogs came from our one of the rescues that we did, I guess, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. There was a feral beagle pack that was part of a big case down in Virginia. And we got one of the runty feral beagles, who immediately has expanded to become a very large house-friendly beagle, who just, like her runtiness disappeared within hours, basically, and she assumed the proportions that beagles prefer to have, which is large. But she definitely is a huge part of our lives, and so we have 2 different dogs who've come from various cases, but the animal rescue team was directly involved in us getting Lucy, so we're very happy about that.
No, thank you. We love hearing those stories.
Yeah.
I'm echoing Carrie. I love you guys so much. I look up to a lot of the stuff that you do. So it's really, really cool that we got to have you on the show today to talk a little bit about the immense amount of work that you do and how you help this organization. So
yeah, and let's all cross our fingers, no bad hurricanes. I mean, honestly, this is going to be the year where we would actually expect a possible sharknado. So let's just hope no sharknadoes, no sharkacanes, no none of that. None of that. Yeah.
Exactly.
None of that.
All right. Well, Jessica, thank you so much. Jessica Johnson, again, Senior Director of the Animal Rescue Team at the Humane Society of the United States. It was so fun. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being on the show today just to talk to us about a little bit of what we can do to help animals in need.
Sure.
And normally we say stay safe, but instead we'll say thanks for keeping other people safe.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. And for everybody listening too, just the questions that you should be asking after this episode. Are you prepared? Do you have a disaster kit ready? Are you emergency prepared? Because in the event of an emergency, you cannot run over all around the house and get stuff ready. So like Jessica said, humanesociety.org has a resources page, and they have a disaster prep kit and tips and suggestions to get you prepared and feeling comfortable in the event that anything, cross our fingers, is not going to happen, but might happen. So please head to humanesociety.org. You know where to find us, and head to the disaster kit for sure. So yeah, that's all we have for today's show. Thanks again, Jess, for joining us.
Sure. Thank you, guys.